or videos by a business in Queenstown. They are fronting for the PPPC, trying to gather sympathy as we now go into the end stages of the March 2nd, 2020 election, where the results are going to be declared. They know that they have a very, very weak case before the CCJ, and so they're going to try all manner of mechanisms. So look out for it. It's being edited as we speak.
That's right. All right, so quickly before we bring you that video with Prime Minister Moses Nagamootoo on that radio interview there in St. Kitts and Nevis, we just want to quickly take you all the way back to once we came and how we arrived here. On March the 2nd, Guyanese went to the polls for the March 2nd general and regional elections. Having concluded those elections and the 10 declarations that were made by the ROs of the various districts, the People's Progressive Party civic cry foul as it relates to Region 4 and demanded a national recount of the boxes in Region 4 or District 4. His Excellency the President, in wanting to bring about truth, fairness, and a conclusion to the electoral process, agreed to have all 10 electoral districts do a national recount of the boxes. His Excellency President David Granger extended an invitation to the CARICOM community, in which 4 prime ministers were here in Guyana. Having done so, a memorandum of understanding was signed between His Excellency President David Granger and the leader of the opposition, Barrett Jagdeo. That MOU led to a gazetted order by the Guyana Elections Commission. That gazetted order spelled out in detail what are the documentation and other items that they are looking for.
Correct.
To reconcile with the various boxes and, of course, the statutory documents that should be found therein. Having went through the exercise for 33 days, it was a two-part or two-pronged approach. One was the numerical count of the boxes, and of course the numerical count.
And the qualitative count.
And the qualitative count. So having done both of that, the CEO, the Chief Elections Officer of the Guyana Elections Commission, had to now bring value or validate those votes, having been able to reconcile. So outside of the total amount of figures that were first shown in terms of the total tabulated numbers, those were the raw figures and not figures that were legitimized. The CEOs in his report brought validity to those votes.
And this is the aspect of the national recount order that you will see the PPP running from for all their lives. They are running from this aspect of the national recount order that they signed on to. They will not be speaking to this at all on Wednesday before the CCJ, because this is the heart of what the national recount order sought to do. It was not just about counting vote, but scrutinizing the process that got those votes into the ballot boxes. And that is why the statutory documents were so important. This is what the National Recount Order 60 of 2020 focused on at the heart of it. It says the reconciliation of ballots issued with ballots cast, ballots destroyed, ballots stamped, spoiled, and deemed necessary, their counterfoils, their stubs, authenticity of ballots, the number of voters listed and crossed out as having voted, the number of votes cast with ID cards, the number of proxies issued and utilized, statistical anomalies, occurrences recorded in the poll book. Because what they're telling us now is that all of this is rubbish. All we want is the tabulated figures, which show that we got more votes than the other guy, and let's be sworn into office, and let the other guy who entered the recount with this in mind go to court afterwards through an elections petition to get redress.
Mercy. So that was stage 1 of the 4-part exercise. Having completed stage 1 of the 4-part exercise, the next stage was the CEO, the Chief Elections Officer of the Guyana Elections Commission, Mr. Keith Lowenfield, submitting his report, of which was done. Immediately after this, the 3rd stage, in which the chairman of the Elections Commission and the commissioners sat and deliberated on the report having been submitted by the CEO. The 4th and final stage of the exercise should have been the declaration by the chairman of the Elections Commission, Justice Claudette Singh. However, there have been a question as to what the term means in terms of valid votes. A private citizen, Ms. Eslyn Davis, took a motion to the Court of Appeal to sought clarity on what is the meaning of the term valid votes. On Monday last, 2 out of 3 justices rule that the total amount of votes cast relates to and means the total amount of valid votes. And that is the judgment. That is the ruling. The CEO, Mr. Keith Lowenfield, submitted his report based on the total amount of valid votes. The request that was made by the chairman of the Elections Commission, Justice Claudette Singh, to the CEO, Mr. Keith Lowenfield, is in keeping with Section 96 of the Representation of the People's Act. The Representation of the People's Act, Section 96, speaks to the Chief Elections Officer calculating the total number of valid votes. That is in the Constitution. Now, the fourth and final stage should be the chairman of the Elections Commission acting only in accordance with the Constitution, Section 177(2)(b, which states, and I quote, that the chairman of the Elections Commission shall deem a person to be president-elect acting only in accordance with the advice given to her by the Chief Elections Officer, Mr. Keith Lowenfield. Yeah. That report is with her. Now that the People's Progressive Party Civic has moved to the Caribbean Court of Justice, knowing full well that the Caribbean Court of Justice has no jurisdiction in the matter. In 2004, a law was signed into being by then President Barrett Jagdeo. In that law, it spoke to the appeal court in Guyana having the final say on matters of the Constitution. Barrett Jagdeo himself signed that into being. Now, all of Guyana, many of our Caribbean territories, await to see the outcome of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Because for the Caribbean Court of Justice to say that they have jurisdiction in this matter, it is to trample on the sovereignty of this country and to make a mockery of our Constitution. Even though the Caribbean Court of Justice is in Trinidad and Tobago, it's noteworthy to mention to you that the Caribbean Court of Justice is not the final court of Trinidad and Tobago because they have not signed on to that. Similarly, Jamaica has not. And several other jurisdictions are watching to see whether or not the Caribbean Court of Justice will trample on their sovereignty and their constitution. All on sundry await to see the outcome of the Caribbean Court of Justice. We heard in that piece the president of the Caribbean Court of Justice reacted to the question asked about outside influence. That question was based on Mayor Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados and Chairman of CARICOM, pronouncement just a few days ago, knowing full well that this matter is now before the Caribbean Court of Justice. The justices there at the Caribbean Court of Justice stated that no external influence will influence the decision that is going to be taken by them. Again, there is no decision to be taken by the Caribbean Court of Justice other than saying that they have no jurisdiction in the matter. Guyana's constitution is pollusive. That law was signed into being by former President Barrett Jagdeo.
Yep. And Chris, I would just advise that that video that was in production by the PPPC, by that business in Queenstown, might already be in circulation. And we are going to definitely be keeping an eye on that. And we're told that there might even be some churches featuring some church members being featured in that also, in that issue concerning the elections. Again, they're whipping up support for their case because they know it's a very, very weak case. It has to pass the jurisdiction test first before the CCJ. As Chris rightly mentioned, the CCJ has to determine whether itself has jurisdiction to hear the case, and then they have to pass the test of the national recount order that they signed on to, stating how the votes were going to be scrutinized to become valid votes, credible votes. They have to go through the national recount order and then to see where we go next. But we know where we are and where we stand, that David Granger, His Excellency David Arthur Granger, was duly re-elected to a second term in government, and as soon as this case is out of the way, we'll see him being sworn into office.
Exactly. So late report coming out from region number 6 this afternoon. The People's Progressive Party Civic in Berbice, region 6, is collecting ID card from several of their supporters. They are paying these supporters for their ID cards. We're not certain as to exactly why this is being done, but the information emanating from Berbice, region 6, late this afternoon, is that the People's Progressive Party Civic is collecting ID cards from their supporters and people in region 6, and they're being paid to release him. We should remind you now that as a result of what has transpired in Guyana's election, several of the Caribbean territories are watching as well too. In St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a member of parliament speaking to her supporters, because that country will soon be going into elections, that she mentioned to that country that no Guyana is going to happen here, and she made reference to several dead people being on Guyana's voters list. And there in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, they've made a commitment that they will comb through the voters list in St. Vincent and Grenadines and ensure that no dead people or people who have migrated would be on the voters list to vote in that election. Neighboring Trinidad and Tobago, as they prepare to head into their election cycle, the government there is collecting back ID cards of those persons who are deceased. Again, this is as a result of what they saw play out here in Guyana, that the Trinidad and Tobago authorities are not taking any chances. All of the ID cards of their nationals who have died, they are in the process right now of collecting back those ID cards to avoid a similar situation that occurred here in Guyana happening there in Trinidad and Tobago. So Trinidad and Tobago, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and many of the other territories are watching carefully in terms of what happened here in Guyana, with a view of preventing it from happening in their jurisdiction. So the People's Progressive Party Civic has made Guyana famous, unfortunately, for the wrong reasons. Over-rigging.
They rigged so much they've elected a prime minister now.
Exactly.
But the good that has come out of it is that these other Caribbean countries have now become more vigilant. Because you cannot take anything for granted. You go to an election with a bloated list, you suffer the consequences.
Exactly. And that is exactly what happened here. Guyana, with our population 750,000 people, we went into the elections with a voters list that reflects 661,000 people. Impossible. And we remind you, it was the People's Progressive Party Civic in 2019 that fought against the house-to-house registration exercise. And we keep asking the same question. Why would any political party like the PPP, who claims that they are transparent and accountable and want transparency and accountability, why would they fight against having the voters list cleansed? Removing all of those names that are dead, removing the names of persons who have either migrated. They didn't want that. They wanted the list to remain the same because they knew what they would have done with the list, and we saw it play out. But, like the People's Progressive Party Civic, no one expected that we would have had to open all of the ballot boxes and search them detail by detail. You know, the slang on the road is that they get skin up as a result of the exercise that we just had. They get skin up. And now everything out in the open. Everything out in the open.
And Chris, I've heard it said that historically we knew that the PPP were involved in rigging of elections. We knew that. We just couldn't prove it. And there isn't a clearer case than the 2020 elections. What transpired when you have scores of ballot boxes coming without its statutory documentation that enables us to reconcile those votes and enter them into the valid votes category. Then we began to saw what really transpired. The missing certificates of employment, the missing oaths of identity, the missing poll books, and the other mountain of irregularities. Valid votes in the rejected votes envelope, valid votes for the Apnu+Afc among the PPP votes. So many other irregularities. Ballots not stamped because the large number of ballots in particular polling stations not being stamped, disenfranchising the electors, scores upon scores of electors. The anomalies in this election cycle, they are so great that the chief elections officer said in his preliminary report that district after district, he could not say that the elections were fair nor credible.
Mercy, 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 mercy. They made a mess of it. And of course, too, you've seen a lot of tweets and messages from foreign territories, if I can say that, and senators abroad and so forth. We remind you, Guyana is a sovereign state. Guyana obtained independence on the 26th of March 1966. Guyana has a constitution that governs this country. Guyana has rules and laws, and Guyana's courts system must be respected by all and sundry. And that is why we continue to remind people. On several occasions when His Excellency the President spoke at those diplomatic functions, he made mention the fact that Guyana has always enjoyed a good relationship for a number of years by several of those countries. And those relationships are based on mutual respect, non-interference.
Right.
And he continues to stress that. That is how Guyana operates. Just yesterday in the parliament in Trinidad and Tobago, where the opposition members sought to get from the Prime Minister acting what is the Trinidad and Tobago's position as it relates to Guyana. His answer was elusive, that the government of Trinidad and Tobago does not interfere in the internal affairs of a sovereign state. And of course, it is no secret as to why the opposition members of parliament in Trinidad and Tobago would have been asking that question. Because many times we tell you that opposition leader there in Trinidad and Tobago, Kamla Cesar, could be dubbed the twin sister of Barra Jagdeo here in Guyana. And of course, we date you back to that no confidence motion in which Charandas Prasad voted with the opposition. It was several members in the Trinidad opposition and businessmen in Trinidad and Tobago who funded his operation to coerce him to vote in favor of the opposition. So we are aware in terms of what to expect from the Trinidad and Tobago opposition forces there. Kamla Cesar, twin sister of Barra Jagdeo here in Guyana, and all of that. But we continue to watch all of this, but we remind you, I said to somebody the other day, it's like the case of what Fox Burnham always says, you can take a man out of a colony, but you can't take the colony out of some men. And this is exactly what you're seeing now playing out with the opposition party here in Guyana, is that they don't believe that we can solve our own problems in this country, that they have to call on the forces on the other side, come help us, look what they're doing to we, and all of that nonsense. We are an independent and a sovereign state. We have our rules, we have our laws, we have our constitution, and we must settle our differences in Guyana. I said to some folks day before yesterday in a meeting that I had, former President Dr. Cheddi Jagan must be rolling in his grave, because he is one who fought against imperialism. He always believed that, in his words, the white man must manage their affairs there, and we in Guyana must manage our affairs here. End of quote. Former President Dr. Cheddi Jagan, he must be rolling in his grave to see the leadership of his party, having known that the PPP fought against imperialism, and now the leaders of that party is simply opening the country to all and sundry. Come, take a piece and we'll give you some.
As a matter of fact, Chris, on the 26th day of May, we're celebrating our 54th independence anniversary. This year, His Excellency David Arthur Granger did say that, and I quote, Guyana as a sovereign state established diplomatic relations with scores of other states on the principles of mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, non-interference in each other's internal affairs, respect for treaties and international law, and the rejection of the use of force to settle international disputes, among other issues.
That's us. That's who we are. Non-interference, neutral respect, respecting of persons' sovereignty and territorial integrity. Speaking of territorial integrity, on Tuesday, the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, will be hearing that case between Guyana and Venezuela.
And you remember it was then President Barra Jagdeo who was willing to cede part of our territory to appease Venezuela. Barra Jagdeo.
Yep.
Barjaglio.
And of course, it's the APNU-AFC government who sought to bring an end to this years-long dispute between Guyana and Venezuela. So that matter comes up for hearing on Tuesday. And of course, that is the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. We will be bringing you detailed information. We will have our contributors who will be providing us with step-by-step information in terms of what is transpiring there at the International Court of Justice. And then, of course, on Wednesday, there is the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, in terms of this matter that is before them. But we don't predict that that should be a long-winded day, because the Caribbean Court of Justice has no jurisdiction in the matter. So quite early we should get over that CCJ ruling. But on Tuesday, that ICJ, the International Court of Justice, we will be bringing you detailed information. That is when Guyana comes up with the dispute with Guyana and Venezuela. And of course, we will be bringing you updates step by step as it unfolds there at the ICJ.
So it's a big week in the court system for Guyana. Again, at the ICJ, as Chris mentioned, and at the Caribbean Court of Justice, where the air finale, Dr. Mr. Jaglio and others versus S.N. David. That case is going to come before the Caribbean Court of Justice, and as you know, that is the case at the moment that is stalling the declaration that David Arthur Grange has been re-elected for a second term in office and to be sworn in thereafter. We did talk early on about the Prime Ministerial candidate for the PPC saying that he was elected as Prime Minister-elect. Do we have that footage ready? Yes, and it is quite strange that you would have, again, a man who wants to be second in command of this nation, referring to himself as the Prime Minister-elect. And it was even stranger to see former President Barjaglio resharing that post on his page again with the same caption that this was the Prime Minister-elect. One wonders whether these guys read the Constitution or they just keep opening their mouths and just spewing whatever comes out. For those children who might be watching and getting set for the National Grade 6 assessment on Tuesday, the Prime Minister is appointed by the President after the President himself has been sworn into office. And this is that footage early on with Brigadier Mark Phillips, who came off the mark and no sooner had to return to it. This is that engagement.
As the Prime Minister-elect, Brigadier retired Mark Phillips, the PPPC government will be a government for all Guyanese. It doesn't matter of your race. It doesn't matter whether you supported the APNU-AFC.
Well, they will learn bitterly. It's the same American doorstep they will have to run. It is the same CARICOM that they will have to go to. It is a very, they will not have repercussions, and they live in some insular world that they are insulated. Well, they will learn bitterly.
As the Prime Minister-elect, Brigadier retired Mark Phillips, the PPPC government will be a government for all Guyanese. As the Prime Minister-elect, Brigadier retired Mark Phillips,
Well, welcome back. So quickly, parents, guardians, grandparents, grab the little ones and just re-educate them right there, because with that statement there from the Prime Ministerial candidate of the PPP, your children who are going to write that exam coming up shortly, they might get the answer wrong because he put it out there wrong. He is Prime Minister-elect. I wonder if you got any ministers-elect, Minister of Sports-elect, Minister of Education elect.
Well, there was a DPI director in waiting, so anything is possible. This is the season.
Mercy.
Again, these guys want to be believed. This is a man who's vying for the second highest office in our country, not in our community.
Correct.
In our country, not in our street, in our country, and he does not know that the Prime Minister isn't elected. He does not know, because it wasn't only stated in the text.
Exactly.
He said,
"That's right.
I am Mark Phillips, Prime Minister elect."
It's like
he believed it.
It's like the Bible. You don't know Prime Minister elect, yo. Big up yourself, Mark.
Go back on the mark. Go back on the mark. He believed it. Somebody gave Mark a script which he cannot even read properly, and he believes that he was elected Prime Minister. He is mouthing this. So you imagine if you go to Mark and say Apnu+Afc rigged this election? He coming out there.
Prime Minister elect.
Prime Minister elect.
Yes. Prime Minister
They're trying to rob me of my election.
Retired
Prime Minister elect.
Yes. Oh my God.
The PPPC.
Mercy.
And they want to run a whole country. My God.
You got it. Yeah. Right. So of course, there you have it. Prime Minister elect. First time in Ghana's history.
Yeah.
So you need to make note of that. Mark Phillips.
PPP, you did it.
Yeah, Mark Phillips, former Brigadier of the Ghana Defense Force. First time in Ghana's history. The first Prime Minister to be elected in Guyana. Congratulations, Marcus.
And that's the difference with us. We went to the courts to interpret the Constitution.
Yes.
Mrs. and David. They have just changed the Constitution. They said, we say the Prime Minister is elected.
But you know that I mean, Ms. Haslin Davis had to go to the courts for interpretation in terms of the English language, because we knew that the recount exercise was to bring about the total number of valid votes. But the people said, no, it's the total amount of tabulated numbers.
Oh boy.
You understand me? So they have a problem with English language. Now here it is. Oh my God. Prime Minister elect Mark Phillips.
Comprehension now.
Big up yourself, my body. Bless up.
PPPC government.
What strikes me, Chris, is that
will be a government.
He said the words, Prime Minister elect Mark Phillips.
So outside of the text being on the screen, because you could say, well, oh, you know, the operators made a mistake.
Typo.
It's not Prime Minister elect, but I am Mark Phillips.
There was
Prime
not
Minister
only a
elect.
typo, it was a speako.
A speaker.
A typo and a speako.
Oh, Saturday Night Live.
My God.
Mark Phillips, take your stand, my boy.
We're not making this stuff up. Right? We're not trying to be comedians here. We're just looking at the people and reporting the facts.
Yes, that's the facts. Yeah.
Just the facts.
That's right there.
Credible. Or at least reasonably credible. Mark is reasonably credible. Prime Minister elect.
He's reasonably right.
And the CARICOM report said he's reasonably credible.
Yes, he's reasonably credible.
Prime Minister elect.
Prime Minister elect.
Right?
Mark Phillips.
I want to recount.
Yeah, you know.
Mark, I want to recount.
Oh Lord.
Something tells me you weren't elected Prime Minister. Something, I don't know. But I want to go back I want to re-recount. I want to go back in that ballot box, because something tells me. No. Something is fishy here.
Oh my God. But you know the mere fact that you're dealing with a Brigadier of the Ghana Defense Force. So
my God.
When you come out and you made that faux pas, all we say, Mark, as you were. As you were. You know? Stand at ease, Mark.
Even though the people didn't want no child to be left behind, Mark slipped through the crack.
Yeah.
He slipped through in that social studies class.
Oh my God.
He slipped through somewhere there.
Prime Minister elect.
Prime Minister elect.
All right, so here now we will bring for you Prime Minister appointed by His Excellency President David Granger in the 2015 general and regional election. Prime Minister Moses Virasamy Nagamutu just earlier today in a radio interview in St. Kitts and Nevis, where he sought to take the opportunity to set the record straight in terms of what is happening here in Guyana. Here now is Prime Minister appointed Moses Virasamy Nagamutu.
Appointed.
Gone through this process, even though it has taken so long. Certain backers in the United States and elsewhere, they circulated those reports widely that they have won based on their calculation. So that was the first confusion that was thrown into the the Guyana waters and created some ripples. And so the recount was ordered by the president of Guyana in agreement with the leader of the opposition and the elections commission, to which the Caribbean community has been a party. So the recount stated process comprises of 4 parts. One, you count every ballot that was cast in the elections. Secondly, you note all the observations that have been made during the recount, and those have been tabulated, and they form part and parcel of the process, which will be used during a review of what took place. After the review, then a report is submitted to the Elections Commission, which must then subject that report to a review. This is a 3rd stage of review, because you would have put in all the reports what were the observations of persons who have died, persons who are living overseas, deceased who have they voted, people voted for dead people voted for those who have gone overseas. There have been numerous allegations that have been raised during the recount. So there were serious allegations, and so those have to be taken into account in a review of the ballots cast. And then you will have the report based on all of that review. You will have a report submitted to the Elections Commission for a final determination of the results. So there was a 4-part process that was on the way. What the CEO submitted at the end of the recount was a tabulation of votes, ballots cast. And that is why there was need to match those ballots as against the credibility tests, that you have all these ballots cast. This is the number. These are the allegations made of fraud. Documents, official documents showing that should be in the boxes to indicate that people voted in the elections were missing. Whole documents were missing. So one has to look at how these observations impacted on the ballots that were tabulated. And then you will move forward to know whether or not you should have a recalculation of those votes to take out the votes that have been impacted by fraud, have been contaminated by fraud, and this would have impacted on both sides of the major political divide, both the government and the opposition. So the first report by the CEO was based on the tabulation, and he had asked the Elections Commission to discuss the tabulated numbers as against the observations that have been made. But instead, that process was not through, and he was asked, the Chief Elections Officer was asked to prepare a final report. And he was in that process to prepare a final report. So where it is being confused that the Chief Elections Officer declared that the opposition had won, the major opposition had won. That was based only on the raw data that was submitted. And as you know, even the CARICOM team that came here said the elections were characterized by a bloated voters list and by defects. And they concluded, however, that the elections were reasonably credible. And people want to know whether reasonable, credible meet the test of a free and fair elections. You can't be halfway free and halfway slave. You can't be halfway fair and halfway unfair. And these elections must not only be judged on valid votes, but by a process that has been credible. And hence, the ruling of the Court of Appeal is that the votes cast must not simply be votes, they must be valid votes. And those valid votes have to be met, meet the credibility tests to satisfy everyone that the will of the Guyanese people has triumphed in these elections. So that is where the opposition went immediately and challenged and said the Court of Appeal has no right to rule about these votes being valid votes. But nevertheless, the Chief Elections Officer submitted the report. That's what The final report says that the incumbent APNU-AFC has won these elections by a one-seat majority. Yeah. Well, there are 2 points I want to make. One, the Constitution vests authority in the Chief Elections Officer to present the final report on which the results of an election is based. As mandated by the Constitution, he will determine, based on the observations that have been made of irregularities, if these are material. There is a section of the law that speaks to the issue of material irregularities, whether these would have affected any polling district or would have impacted on any particular ballot box. There was a stage where an objection was made, where boxes were found not to have the official documents inside. So you don't know where those ballots came to. People might have walked in there and placed those ballots in a box. But the voters list had to be ticked off that these persons came in and they cast a ballot. There was no voter documents. So those votes were questionable, to say the least. And there was an approach to the Elections Commission that they should not be used in the tabulation process. The chairman of the Elections Commission decided no, every vote would count, but you would have an opportunity to raise objections subsequently by way of the observations that were made during the recount, which had been documented and placed before the Chief Elections Officer for a review. So the elections officer, by law, has certain powers to decide how allegations of fraud and the evidence of fraud, in a case, a sample case, the Commissioner of Police was requested by the Elections Commission to verify a list of persons, whether these persons are in Guyana. And he produced what is now the evidence that many of those persons whose names appear in the list, that they were not resident in Guyana, at least not at the time or when elections took place on March the 2nd. So how did we have persons voted for those who are overseas? And there was also the issue of the chief of the Commission of Police producing documents to say how many these were persons who have died, but the names appear in the voters list. You see, you have a situation where, Jeremy, in a country of 750,000 Guyanese registered as the population, 661,000 appear on the voters list. I go back that 750,000 Guyanese, you know about the pattern of migration out of Guyana over many.
All right, welcome back. So the last piece that you heard Prime Minister Moses Nagamootoo referring to there is that voters list. We continue to tell you about that voters list, that bloated voters list. Population with 750,000 people, and to have a voters list of 661,000, it is an impossibility. All right, so we got some information.
Talking about numbers.
Yeah, speaking about numbers, speaking about fraudulent elections and so forth, we want now to bring your attention to what is transpiring in the United States of America, more particularly in the state of New Jersey. Just yesterday, an article that was published in the newspaper there in New Jersey allude to fraudulent elections.
This in the USA?
In the US,
oh.
in the US,
USA.
in the US. So essentially, if you saw the link, the Attorney General in New Jersey State and the national recount that was had here in Guyana, you will have that Mr. Keith Lowenfield, the Chief Elections Officer of the Guyana Elections Commission, has been vindicated. And he has been vindicated by the Attorney General of New Jersey State. Why? This piece that we've seen before us, this is an incident that occurred in the United States as it relates to their elections that were had there in the month of May. Several cases, clear cases of electoral fraud. And of course, the Attorney General speaking at length as it relates to that incident.
Yep. Chris, in that article I'm reading, it says, in the City Council election, 16,747 votes were 16,747 vote by mail ballots were received. This sounds familiar, 16,000, but only 13,557 votes were counted. More than 3,190 votes, 19% of the total ballots cast, were disqualified by the Board of Elections. So they don't have elections
commission, but they have
petition
election board.
What about elections
No, but
petition?
that's what I'm saying. It is not up for that in this case because the electoral board has that power, like the
omnibus power,
like the Guyana Elections Commission. So, as I said before, Mr. Keith Lowenfield, CEO of the Guyana Elections Commission, has been vindicated by the New Jersey Attorney General. I mean, just a quick piece. Let me state this to you. It is ironic that the same day the U.S. senators are calling for fraudulent votes to be counted, the media in the U.S. is reporting that 20% of the ballots in the municipal elections in New Jersey were rejected. Right? This is significant because the nature of the fraud in New Jersey election is
USA,
very similar to that of the fraud that was uncovered during the vote recount in Guyana. This is a total vindication for the Chief Elections Officer of the Guyana Elections Commission, Mr. Keith Lowenfield.
And in a similar article, Chris, they're saying here the city's NAACP chapter are calling for the entire election to be invalidated.
Exactly.
Oh, it's a year of invalidating elections.
Exactly. So
I thought it only happens in this section of the world. This is the USA.
No, you see, look,
invalidating elections.
You know, I mean, viewers, listen. As I said to people, you know, there is a point in time when a line has to be drawn. Right? There's a point in time where a line has to be drawn. For those of you who are Christians or followers of the word, Ecclesiastes tells us that there's a time and season for everything under the sun. And even with diplomacy, there is a time when you have diplomacy and there's a time when you have to draw that line.
The Attorney General here in New Jersey has drawn that line, Mr.
Exactly.
Joel. He has drawn the line. He has 4 persons have already been charged with electoral fraud, so the line has been drawn.
The very same day when you have senators in the United States writing in as it relates to the issue in Guyana and stating that we should declare a government based on the national recount with fraudulent votes. They are saying that U.S. senators, and right there in the United States, in New Jersey, the Attorney General, the New Jersey Municipal Election Board has just invalidated 20% of the votes having been cast there in New Jersey because of electoral fraud. And now there's a call by the NAACP calling for the whole elections that were done in the municipality there in New Jersey State to be nullified.
Invalidated.
In America. So should the Foreign Affairs Minister of Guyana now write to the United States, you know, write to them concerning these this matter of electoral fraud in New Jersey?
We have noted.
Yeah.
We have noted.
So again, the Attorney General in New Jersey, based on his pronouncement as it relates to the discovery of fraud in the municipal elections there in New Jersey State, he has, by way of doing that, vindicated the Chief Election Officer of the Ghana Elections Commission, Mr. Keith Lowenfield. Again, it is ironic that the same day the U.S. senators calling for fraudulent votes to be counted, the media in the United States is reporting that 20% of the ballots in the municipal elections in New Jersey were rejected. This is significant because the nature of the fraud in New Jersey election is very similar to the fraud uncovered during the national recount in Guyana. This is a total vindication of the CEO of the Ghana Elections Commission, Mr. Keith Lowenfield. Total vindication. So when you talk about fraud, fraud is fraud. But it appears for these senators in the United States and the ACBE countries that if it's fraud in Guyana, it's a different thing. But when it's fraud in the United States, it's a different thing too. So fraud is fraud for America. But fraud in Guyana means nothing.
Election petition.
Yes, election petition and all of that. Clear case.
Chris, talking about senators, I'm picking up some reporting here, and we're still trying to ascertain the authenticity. But from the face of it, it looks reasonably credible. This is a reporter would have asked Senator Rubio a question, and he would have responded. Again, we're still checking to see the authenticity, but it looks reasonably credible.
80%.
The reporter would have asked, Senator Rubio, you signed on to a statement about Guyana's elections and demanded that the president concede. Sir, are you aware that there were widespread fraud discovered in the recount results? Senator Rubio is alleged to have responded, we believe that the people of Ghana deserve democracy. Too long of African nations we have had attacks on democracy. The U.S. Senate will not allow governments to accede to office under a cloud of suspicion. West Africans deserve a chance to choose their government, and results must be honored. So we're still checking the authenticity of that, but it looks reasonably credible.
Is he speaking about Guyana or Ghana?
Yeah. Well, he was first, so
West African country.
Guyana is a West African country. We're still checking the authenticity, but it looks reasonably credible.
But if that is indeed credible, then it's clear that Senator Rubio doesn't know which country he's writing on.
Well,
because if he's referring to Guyana as a Western African country, he must be speaking about Ghana.
Well, I wouldn't blame Rubio so much. If our own Mr. Phillips doesn't know you like the Prime Minister, how am I going to blame Rubio for not knowing that we're not a West African nation?
Prime Minister-elect.
Prime Minister-elect.
Prime Minister-elect. So again, folks, quickly, this report in the U.S. media just came out on the 26th of June. That will be yesterday. So that's yesterday in reported on voter fraud in New Jersey State. And of course, as we said, the Attorney General there in New Jersey State has launched a full investigation as it relates to the clear cases of electoral fraud in the municipality there in New Jersey State. And of course, by virtue of him and the New Jersey board invalidating some 20% of the ballots haven't been cast, it is similar to that of what is happening in here in Guyana. This is a total vindication of Mr. Keith Lowenfield by the Attorney General of New Jersey State. It is ironic. The same day the U.S. senators are called for fraudulent votes to be counted, the U.S. media is reporting that 20% of the ballots in the municipal elections in New Jersey were rejected. This is significant because the nature of the fraud in New Jersey election is very similar to the fraud uncovered during the vote recount in Guyana. This is a total vindication for the CEO of the Guyana Elections Commission.
And Chris, in Malawi, there was a similar issue with voter fraud too. And it seems to, I'm picking up here in some comments by Mr. Ronald Austin Jr. In Malawi, he said, it is done. This was always the winner, but they cheated him. Elections annulled. And now he has won in a clean process. The people of Malawi defended their democracy by insisting that only valid votes count. The struggle was long, and he sends congratulations to the president-elect.
Exactly. So all over You're seeing this external influence in elections in many parts of the world, where it seems to be imposing themselves
Regime change.
Regime change,
Yeah.
to bring about regime change and trying to allow votes that are otherwise fraud to be counted in people's election. Like the people there in Malawi, one has to stand up and defend their democracy and their sovereignty as an independent nation, and that is Guyana. The CEO of the Elections Commission, Mr. Keith Lowenfield, has submitted his report to the chairman of the Elections Commission based on the total valid votes. The request that was made by the chairman of the Elections Commission to the CEO was that, in keeping with Section 96 of the Representation of the People's Act, that act speaks to, and I quote, that the chief elections officer will calculate the total number of valid votes. He has done so, and his report is before the chairman of the Elections Commission. In that report, it states clear that the APNU-AFC has won the March 2nd general and regional elections by some 170 plus thousand votes. The People's Progressive Party Civic lost the elections with some 166,000 votes. We await to hear from the Caribbean Court of Justice on July the 1st. Yeah. The expectation is only that the Caribbean Court of Justice will state pollusive, as our Constitution states, that they have no jurisdiction in the matter. All and sundry are waiting and watching. Yeah. The Caribbean territories as well are waiting and watching to see whether or not the Caribbean Court of Justice is going to trample on the sovereignty of a country and disregard its constitution.
I know who else is waiting? The Prime Minister-elect. The Prime Minister-elect.
In the Beningi.
I know what it brought back to memory. The Prime Minister-elect, Chris, said that Mr. Irfan Ali was the Minister of Health.
Yes, I remember that.
Prime Minister-elect.
Prime Minister-elect. Mercy. All right, so folks, that is our program for tonight.
7:30 in the morning.
And as we said to you again, we await to see the outcome of the Caribbean Court of Justice, which the ruling can only be that they have no jurisdiction in the matter. Yep. And of course, we will continue to bring you the information as it unfolds. On Tuesday coming, it's the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, and that is as it relates to the border controversy between Guyana and Venezuela. That will come up then. Tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m., our colleague Randolph Critchlow is going to lead us off during the day. And of course, we got some numbers that we want to put on the big board for you starting from tomorrow. And that will lead us up right into Wednesday, when the official declaration for His Excellency, the President, David Granger, to be sworn in as President of the Republic of Guyana for a second term. We will then be bringing you information in terms of what or how the swearing-in ceremony is going to take, noting that we are operating within the pandemic and of course social distancing and so forth. So we will bring you the information to guide you in terms of how exactly the swearing-in ceremony of President David Granger is going to be had. On behalf of my colleague, Mr. Sherrod Duncan, our technical team, Mr. Weeks, Mr. Arnold, we'd like to bid you a pleasant rest of your evening. We look forward to seeing you right back here tomorrow at 7:30. Until then, goodbye for now.
And good night to everyone except Brigadier Mark Phillips, the Prime Minister-elect.